Today I want to clean up data with you in FileMaker using rules that I've argued for in other videos. So I've asked ChatGPT to give some messy data, including a mixture of date formats, a mixture of number formats, and I haven't been specific with it about how I want the other data to be. The approaches I'm going to take should result in a file with copy-paste scripts, a file which I will probably try to sell for people who want to take a shortcut and not build this themselves. But this video should cover lots of principles of ways of going about cleaning the data, in addition to achieving functionality in a system for reusing scripts for cleaning up data again and again. So some of the principles I'm going to use are no black boxes. So by this I mean you should be able to see what is being done to the data every step of the way. Part of this means no calculation fields. I want to script everything for various reasons, including because I always recommend avoiding calculation fields in FileMaker no matter what. I will avoid case functions and long functions in general, or long calculations or complex chains of calculations in a single calculation. No custom functions. Custom functions are something else I argue against. I always argue that scripts should be used instead of custom functions for many reasons. No plugins, because we want to, that would be another black box, and we want to see what's happening, and we want optimal reusability, including into the future, and we want the lowest maintenance options possible, and we want to be able to reuse components where possible. So lots of cleanup processes may be used across other cleanup processes, and we may embed one cleanup process in another. So we want to make scripts that are as reusable as possible. We want to be definite in all things. That can partly be achieved for the developer with naming conventions for fields. We also need to strip back to the core fundamental data. We need to strip it back to whatever is appropriate for that type of data. And we want to keep it in that state, in the most tidy and precise state and most universal state that it can be in, before then also having outputs that are specific, that may be, say, formatted in some way for a particular user. So as an example, we might have date input, and we want to store the date in a particular universal way, but then we may want to output dates in many different formats for users. And I want these formats to all be exportable or displayable within the data itself, and to be fully controlled by scripting processes. So I'm going to totally avoid layout level features where the software or system converts formats for you, because that has some black box issues, but it also has some issues in exporting. It complicates how you have to go about exporting data, can be a bit unreliable, is another place where control can be lost because control isn't at one point. So yeah, if we want, for example, 5 different date format outputs for 5 different types of users, I'm not going to be taking advantage of layout level features. I want to achieve these conversions within the script itself. So I have Claris FileMaker here, and I want to just go ahead and create a new file. So I'm going to do that by taking this is the request I made to ChatGPT, give messy data for cleanup in Claris, including contact details and currency amounts not rounded and not to enough significant figures and without sufficient currency information. So I specifically wanted some numbers in this export. So I'm going to download this CSV that ChatGPT has generated for me, and I'm going to drag it into FileMaker, which will help me create an FMP12 file, and I'm going to call that file data cleaner. I don't want it. You never want a FileMaker file or many files saving to iCloud directly, really. The synchronizations can screw up your file. So I'm going to save this to downloads. And do I want to honor the original names? I can do, but I would rather take this opportunity to okay. Let's call this source, and I'll give it a random code. I'll go with convert. So we have 36 records. And I'm going to go and rename all of these. Import. I'm going to add import to the end of the name as a naming convention. I don't know of any good tools to make changes like this to many fields at once, unfortunately. So like many things in FileMaker, it's a very manual process. Okay, and normally I want all data to come in as text. And what shall I focus on first? Let me look at the data. Dates are quite challenging, numbers are quite challenging. I may leave those until later. So IDs, I assume they will remain the same. I want to go and add a UUID, and I'll use one of my naming conventions, which is update on refresh if empty. And I want that to auto-populate with a UUID. And for names, we can see that we've got some trimming issues here. First name, last name, it's nice that these are separated, but you can see GPT has given us a full name that hasn't been separated. And how's the condition of the email addresses? Do we have any invalid email addresses? We do. There's no TLD here. Okay. So there are issues with email addresses, phone numbers. Okay. All we really need in phone numbers is a number. Address, line 1. Okay. Address to import, city import, region statement, postcode import, country. Okay, currency, amount notes. Okay, we have a GPT has decided to explain to us an issue with each number or difference between each number given, and then we have different date formats also. Okay. So focusing first on what we can get from a first name. Do any of these have trim issues? Okay, we have a triple space here. But Yman is a first name in Chinese, and even though so it's a 2-character first name, but both characters which have a syllable each are a whole given name, just like this is a whole given name. Jean-Luc and Wyman are both whole given names, even though there are 2 separate words, and this is hyphenated and the Chinese one is not hyphenated. Okay, so we can do something with this. Okay, first cleanup script is going to be remove, okay, cleanup, remove inner, remove duplicate spaces. Okay, and I want to see if there's a native FileMaker function, Claris FileMaker function for removing duplicate spaces internally. I only know of the trim function. Leading and trailing. There's a trim all function. Is there not? Yes, there is. Wrong click. Trim all spaces between text. Remove forward spaces. This is removing all spaces instead of double spaces or multiple spaces. Multiple, double. Okay. So I think we're going to, unless there's a new function that I don't know about or I've missed a function for many years, to remove these spaces we're going to have to use our own process. So we're going to take whatever input we have. So I'm going to, and I want to be able to see it when I'm debugging. So I will see the script parameter as a variable, and then I want to start a loop because we want to remove any double spaces, but we're going to have to do that again and again and again. And I will just set a variable that is loop count, and loop count +1, loop count nothing, and I want to, let's see, I want to exit loop if, but that's not going to be dependent on the loop count, it will depend on the data. So, and then I'm going to give my loop a value. The value is going to just be the script parameter. And I want to say, I want to count the number of double spaces. So pattern count, I hope this works, search string. I want to search for a double space. So here I have one space, two spaces, and I want to search for that within my value WIP. So WIP is work in progress. And I'll put a comment here that WIP equals work in progress. Okay, so we're getting that's actually a pattern count. So we want to say double count of double spaces. So if we achieve, and let's say get as number to be safe, and let's say exit loop if count of double spaces is equal to 0. Sometimes it's safer to say less than 1. Let's say equal to 0. And so if there are still double spaces after this, so if there are no double spaces, the loop will be exited, and we can exit with the value work in progress, or let's say no, let's avoid that. Value final, and then let's say value first, and the value work in progress can be value first. Okay, count of double spaces. Okay, so if there are double spaces, then we want to remove them. So we want to make update our value work in progress to, we want to use the substitute function to replace a double space with a single space. Sorry, we're searching for a double space and we want to replace it with a single space. And as a data source, we want to use the value WIP. So this variable, this set variable, will overwrite the variable data that is being used. And that might do the job. So next to this first name import, let's add, can I add a field here? I'll just modify here maybe. What happens if I go to list view? Not as tidy to view. Form view is not as tidy. Okay, let's stay in table view, let me just do define database, and first name, I want to go ahead and create a new field, which is first name after space removals. And I want to say use one of my naming conventions, which is updates on refresh. After removal of all duplicate spaces. Okay, and let's make sure we can see that alongside the original. Okay, whyman, I want to create a script which refreshes all the records in this layout. So, or refreshes the current record. So we have our layout, table, sorry, is called let me call this an import type rather than source. And let me avoid, I like to avoid spaces in my table name. So, but then I want that name to be used in my script. So at the beginning, and then I will say refresh current record. And then I will say perform script. And I will use the script that I just created. And the parameter I will give it is the first name import, and then I want to populate the field I just created with the result of that script. Okay, and then I think I will commit the records first to try and help make sure that the data goes into that perform script, and I will commit after. And then I will, let's see whether that script turns up in these menus. It does. So I'm going to select this record, and I'm going to turn the debugger on, and I'm going to run this script. So, and I'm going to turn the data viewer on so I can monitor the outputs. So we've picked up the name, and we've got that as a script parameter as the first value and as the value that is the work in progress. And then we're going to loop, and first loop we find that we don't exit because there is a single, at least one double space in there, and then we substitute it out. Has that worked? You can see here one of the spaces has been removed, and we loop around, and this time we should exit the loop because there should be no double spaces. Oh no, there is still a double space because there were 3 spaces. So we have another update there to the value, and you may notice that I didn't set the last value to be the final value. So I'm going to just update this now. I'm going to say that value final is equal to value WIP, and I'll save that, which will abort the script. And let's try again. Run the debug. First loop, second loop, third loop. The value final has been set, and that will be the script result. So now the script result will go into that field, and we're done. So that's the first cleanup process in action. Now we want to go and apply that to all of the data. So I'm going to create another script which starts with the same name of the table, and I'm going to say refresh all records in in table, and I will say new window, and I will get that window to open in the either one of these is fine. I don't know why there are two layouts, but I'll just choose the first one, and I will make sure that all records are shown, and I will go to the first record, and then I will run a loop process that goes to next record. In each loop, go to record next, and exit after last yes. And within that loop, I want to perform a refresh current record, and then at the end of the process I want to close the window, and then potentially I want to refresh the window of wherever I may be, but potentially not. And I think I will potentially put at the end context agnostic. Okay, so if I run this in the debug, we should see the window opens in the right table. We're showing all records. Going to the first record to make sure that all records are looped through, and that cleanup process should be applied to every single record. And when I'm next in the here, I will see, do I want to run the whole thing? I'm just going to close the debug window, which will finish running the script, and you can see that we have all of the results here. So the rule was applied everywhere, and do we want to do any more cleaning up? Some first names, I think, deliberately have lowercase first letters in some languages. So this might be the furthest that I want to take that. But we may want to apply the same rule to surnames. So, and also I want to try and normalize things as much as possible. So I want to go ahead and say, I want to call this given names instead of just first name, so that the name is a bit more precise. And then instead of last name, so I want to use this name format, but I want to have a family names field. And I want to, and I'll make sure this shows on the layout after last name. And I want to, in my refresh the record, I want to go and apply the same script to family names. So I will take last name as an input, and I will get the result from the cleanup to remove duplicate spaces, but this time I will put the result here, and I will save that script. I'll run one as a test. There we go. And then I will run the process across all records. There we go. Now, there was a full name import. Let's see if we can go for a full name export, but let's see if we can create our own full name, because that might be desired. So I'm going to create a new field which is full name, but I'm going to, when I name fields, I try to make the names as descriptive as possible. So I will say family names, given names, final, up, or say family name, given names, reconstructed from family names, given names, and I will say comma, space, and I will say refresh, updates on refresh, updates on refresh. Okay, and then in my refresh record, I want to set that output field by using my family names, and then I want to have a comma, space, and then I want to use given names. Okay, and then let's run that's one of the cats looking for the other cat. He's lost his brother. Okay, I will run this refresh. I will put this here. Now, do we really want a comma when we don't have either name? Maybe, maybe not. If we just have one name, do we want a comma? I would, because it would indicate to me whether a given name is being used or a family name. I will say that, okay, if both are empty, family names, if that's empty and this is empty, then I want to update the field to be nothing. Otherwise, I want that calculation there. Okay, so now if there's no name, we have no comma. If there's only one name, we still get the comma. Shall I force capitalization? Maybe not at this stage. Next, I'm going to look at the email addresses, and I think we can assume that a double at is a typo that could be substituted with a single at, perhaps assuming that there are only two. Let's see. We can let's first get a email address updates on refresh field. Let's put it after the email address. Okay, let's reuse the removal of duplicate spaces. So, okay, remove duplicate at. I don't know whether it's a good idea to use at in a script name. What is the at symbol called? At sign. Okay. So let's look for a double at to remove duplicate ats. And when refreshing the record, let's take the email import and put it in the email output. And then let's move this to what happened to my context agnostic? Okay, I'm putting that in first place so that I can just press Command 1 to refresh everything. So here's my email address output. That at in brackets I'd be reluctant to deal with systematically because I think you can have brackets in email addresses anyway. Let's see. Are brackets allowed in email addresses? Not allowed. Okay. Do systems restrict? Who decides brackets? Okay. Seems different people are saying different things. Plus is allowed. Okay. I'm going to say that that's just not valid. Okay. Let's create a script to say warning email address invalidated by having no at sign. And I'm going to add an extra field saying warning email address, or let's say email import invalid by having no at sign. Let's put that warning on the layout and let's put it next to the email import. And I always want that to be a tag. So, and I also always want it to update on a refresh. So I'm going to be consistent here in my naming, and I'm going to go and get my loops, and I'm going to, what do I need, what do I want to do? I want to count of at signs. Okay, and if the count of at signs, okay, pattern count, the text we're using is the value in progress, and the pattern count is the pattern we're looking for, sorry, not the pattern count, the search string we're looking for is the at sign. So exit, okay, count of at signs. We don't need to loop. Okay, if the count of at signs is less than 1, because I will assume every email address needs an at sign, then we trigger the warning. Otherwise, I will say in all other cases, we don't trigger it. Okay. Even though we're setting the field here in the script, we can also give a final result of yes. Versus final result of nothing. Okay, and the script result can be the final result. Okay, let's test it. Yes, and here we just want a blank. What went wrong here? Let count of at signs. Let me force this as a number. I might have to debug. Let me run the script again. Okay, let's debug because I can't see the error. So let's watch the current value first is the script parameter. I haven't given a script parameter. Right. I see. Okay, I've made a stupid mistake here. Let's not set the fields here. We only want to set variables here so that we can use this script anywhere without it being specific to a particular database. So let me go and give the same email address to that new script, and we don't want to, we want to populate the warning, but we can't just populate it with, oh, we can just populate it with the answer. Okay, let me run this single record refresh on this record. Okay, and let me run it on the one that should trigger. Okay, and now I'm going to run the script across the whole table. Great. Now, if you want a definite, then you'll want to populate with a no to know that you got an answer. So let's do that here. Instead of outputting a blank, we can output a no, and then the script will signal to us that a check has been performed at some point. So also in email addresses, we don't want any double spaces, but in principle, what I'm doing here is working with the data that I've got. There could always be infinite errors, infinite ways to check data, to validate data. We could validate in many different ways, but I'm just going to deal with what I have and what I need to correct here. So I'm moving on to phone numbers. So I'm going to add a field which is telephone or phone number stripped. Updates on refresh. Okay, a way that I want to, so I don't think we need to run loops. So here I want to call it cleanup strip to number only, and I will achieve that by value final. Okay, all I want to do is to use the filter function, which allows me to say that I only want numbers. I don't want dashes. I don't want any characters of any kind. I know that I only want numbers, no matter what. So the text to filter is the value work in progress. Okay, and if I go to the cleanup, data cleaner, cleanup, what's this? Import type AJ. Okay. I'm just duplicating those script steps so that the structure is maintained, and I want to clean up strip to number any, and I'm going to get the phone import. Okay, and I'm going to run that across all of the numbers, and I got nothing. So that's because I have put the numbers in the email address field. So let's see. I really want the numbers here. Let's run it again. Now what have I done wrong? Let's get these numbers. Okay, let's run the debug. I didn't input a telephone number. Oh no, let's see. Let me move this script to the top so that when I run the debug here, I can just jump straight into seeing what number is being pulled. So the parameter is coming into the script. What is happening at this stage? We're getting a number, but I did not use the final value final variable in the exit script. So now I'll run it again. There are our numbers. Now I'm very tempted to leave those numbers in that form. However, if the plus is already there, it implies that we've already been given a country code which we can use. So it's very, whereas in other cases, we don't necessarily know whether there's a leading country code or not. So let's create a field that tells us whether a phone import leads with a plus sign. Tag updates on refresh. Okay. This is my simplest script. So I will duplicate that and I will say text leads with a plus sign. So I definitely want to get the parameter as text. Get as text. To try and force FileMaker to recognize that as a string, not a number, no matter what. And then I want to say, okay, then I want to say if, not case, value WIP, if the left first character equals plus, then we say final script result is yes, else no, and I want to use that variable in the exit. And now in my refresh current record script, I want to populate this based on this. Okay, let's run it. Let's display the field. And import. Okay. Okay, so if yes, then we can now, assuming we're using a system which can have multinational numbers, which would always be the case now, we potentially only want to output numbers in an international format. So, and normally when I do that, I would want it only as a number without the positive sign in front. So I think what I'd do is to create an additional field that only gives us the output if the plus sign was included in the input. So I'm going to say phone number international format. Now it's nice to know which ISO is being followed. ISO phone numbers international. What is the ISO number? Those country codes. International dialing code. No mention of ISO. Numbering plan. There must be an ISO. Is there not? Okay, Wikipedia calls do telephone country codes have an ISO? I can ask Google the same thing. No. Defined by the ITU. Is that the International Telecoms Union or something? E164 assigns codes. Okay. So let's call this phone number ITU E164, country code, then remainder. So let's say excluding plus sign, country code, then remainder, updates on refresh. Okay. Now, if now it's important here that this script happens after both of these. So I'm going to put this in a strict sequence. Section 1 begins. And ends. And I'm going to say if the leads with a plus equals yes, then we can have this be the stripped number. Otherwise, it has to be empty. Okay, let's run that. Okay, so we're only outputting the phone number if we seemed to have been given a international code. And what I would do normally in these cases is to keep the inputs as they are and visible to the user, so that at least the system can attempt to call these numbers. But if a system doesn't try to or says it can't, then the user can always see the original number. So for example, that looks to me like a UK number. And what we can do is we can introduce, so that we don't lose the import, we can introduce a field which is a user override. So we can duplicate this field for the name, and instead of updates on refresh, I will say manual override. That's a standard convention I use for naming fields. And I will modify this, and I will add a manual override field. And I think in layout mode, it would be nice to make a manual override field green, so the user knows it's okay to input values there. Don't know whether that works. Doesn't seem to work. I won't get into that now because it would be a distraction from the main task. I can see as a user here that I want the number to be that. And then we could have a final field that respects any manual overrides. So final updates on refresh. Okay, so we can say if not empty the manual override field, then in the final we use the manual override field. Otherwise, we use the system generated one. Final updates on refresh. Okay, so I'm going to run the script, and now I want to put that new field on the layout. Final updates on refresh. There we go. So here's the final that the system could call. So here, for example, I don't really know whether that's a US number. This one is a Lagos, Nigeria number. So if I go and search for Nigeria International Dialing Code as a user, Nigeria is 234. So I can manually write here. I'm going to assume that the leading 0 is not necessary. And now if I refresh, the final I will get will respect the manual user override. Okay, I'm going back to the full names here. I noticed that there is a LLC, which we will treat as a non-human entity. So we wouldn't want it to have a family name and given name. We would just want it to have a final name. But in order to do that and to respect the full name in its own right, what I want to do is to create a field which states that the entity is not a natural person. So here we have, they're called contacts. I like to call them entities. So entity is a natural person. Tag updates on refresh. And then we have, I'm going to have another strict sequence. So where was the final name? Where were the final names set? They were set here. So that's our second strict sequence. And I want to have a manual override field entity as a natural person tag. And I want, that shouldn't be an update on refresh. That should be a manual override or a manual input. And I want to say, I want a new condition here. So sometimes I start my ifs with if 1 doesn't equal 1, so that everything else can be an else if or an else, and then it's easier to move them around. So the first effective if, because this condition will never be met, is if the natural person, if this equals no, then we can make sure that we set this to blank. Let's see. Let's do this differently. Let's have a name, full name. Let's have a final name. Name final updates on refresh. Okay. 1 doesn't equal 1. Okay, I'm copying this structure and I'm saying if it's a natural person, then I can use the natural person structure. Otherwise, I can use the original full name import. Okay, what is invalid? That needs to be open with an if. You can't open an if sequence with a else if. So the same will be true here. Okay, now what am I missing? Okay, there's another if down there. Okay, let's put the name final on our layout. Okay, and the manual override entity is a natural person. Okay. As a power user, I am going to say yes for all of these. And I'm going to say no, it's not a natural person. And then hopefully I should get a name for everyone. Except, there we go, AMCE Corporation. So you can see how when you clean up the data and you keep these structures and you can just refresh, you can use the rules to refresh all of the records again and again, we can see where the gaps are. And then those gaps can help us to help the user or to help the developer refine the cleanup. So this is another non-natural person, and I will say no. And here we don't actually know, so I will say unknown. There we go. So it's starting to get a little difficult to see everything here. So I'm going to duplicate the layout and look at outputs only. And I will also have one for inputs only. Inputs, or import, shall we say. And I will open those two layouts. And I will, let's see, I will use this to remove whatever I can here. And then I will drag, I will filter out all import fields, which excludes those two. I will drag them here. So those are all the import fields. And over here, I will look at the outputs only, which are the updates on refresh fields. Okay, and then let's see what the difference is between these two layouts. I think I don't really need the first one, but I think we can just call that form view of single record, and I will make that a form view only, and then I will say all fields. Okay, and then I can scroll easily between outputs, which should be cleaner, but I could remove that one. Okay, really, it would be nice to have the finals have final in the name. Then this would be easier to output every time. So let's see. Name final. Phone number. We don't need the warning. Okay, here is our cleaned up data. Why is the entity as a natural person tag showing? Okay, there is our clean data so far. Okay, next date. So the universal date format I like to use is this one, which I think really is a preferred standard for computer systems, including maybe Unix. So this is 8601 format. So I'm going to check whether this date follows the format. So input, or shall we say, is a valid this might be a bit misleading. Let's see. So let me try and copy my standards from elsewhere, from the simplest script. Okay. What do I want to check first? First, I want to check that the first 4 characters are numbers, nothing else. So there are so many ways to do this, but I don't really like to. I'd like to keep every check as simple as possible. So I think what I'll do is to say if I'm going to filter out numbers only, 0 to 9. But I'm only going to get the first 4 characters, and I want the length to be 4. Okay. Then we can name our check. So we can say first 4 characters are numbers. And that could include a 0. Yes. So to be cautious, we probably want to say when we get the left characters, really we want to get as text. I think I'm not super comfortable doing this way. There could be all kinds of number formatting issues with trailing zeros, for example. There will be some complexity in that, and we have to make sure that we're always handling text rather than numbers. So I think what I have to do instead is and it may be simpler for the overall structure of the checking script, is to just check character by character. So I'm going to say I'm going to get the first character in the string, which doesn't need the position function. It needs the middle function. So I want the first character only. So the number of characters is 1 because the first character is 1 here. And I don't really want to use a work in progress. I just want to use the first value again and again. So I think what I want to do to help with debugging is to get character 1 which actually reminds me that there can be a first type of disqualification, which is if the length of the value first isn't how many characters should it be? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. So if the length doesn't equal 10, then we can say length invalid because length does not equal 10, and we can say yes, and we can exit the script and we can just say no. Is a valid. Don't really want to use dashes or symbols in script names, so I will write out dash. Okay. So if the length of the input isn't 10, we can just already disqualify the date as not being valid. And then let's get the first character and the second character and the third. So we want 10, 4, 5. I'm using tabs to go between the white spaces. I'm using Command D to duplicate the script step, and I'm using the spacebar to open the script step and manage it more precisely. An advantage of doing this all at once is it makes it easier to spot errors, and of course it's faster. Okay, character 9. 10. Great. Then if character 1, now we can filter as a number. So there might be a function that tells us whether something is a number is valid. Number. What's the FileMaker function to validate whether an input is a number? I know there is one because I use it all the time to detect the type of input. But actually I don't want to use it here anyway because the FileMaker function itself might be a bit black box. So I want to really very explicitly filter out numbers only, and I want the length to be 1. So if the length is 1, then we know the first character is valid. Otherwise, we exit the script. Whoops. Otherwise, what's going on here? Exit the script as not valid. And we can put for our notes here, invalid because first character is not, let's not say first, because let's say character 1 is not a number, because any number will do in theory. And then we can just duplicate this again and again. I won't use a loop because it's unnecessarily complicated for just 10 characters, but I want to update this warning. But I think what I'll do is to do the duplicates 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and make this. No, that's wrong. I only duplicated the else's. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, weird. In fact, but let's leave out. Okay, well, let's at least do 3. Because 3 and 4 need to follow the same rule. 1, 2. Oh, I just updated 2 to 3. Okay, that one. I think I need some spacing here to help me see where I am. Okay, checking character 3. If character 3 doesn't meet the requirements, then it triggers the error or the invalidity, and then checking character 4. Now character 5 is supposed to be a dash. So if I don't really want to filter out multiple characters here, I just want to check if it really is a dash. So I will say if character 5 equals I don't know if there's a concept of a double equals in if functions. It will probably tell me no, so I can check quite easily. So if it equals a dash, yeah, okay. There are concepts of double equals in finds for exact matches in FileMaker, but not in if functions. So if character 5 is a dash, good. Invalid because character 5 is, let's say character 5 should be and is not a dash. Or let's just say that could be more confusing than helpful. Is not a dash. Okay, and then character 6 follows the same rules as before, as does 7. Character 7 is supposed to be a number, the second month number. Then we move on to the day characters. The dash. So what I'd do here is to go and copy the dash from the 5th character and use it for the 8th character. And then we can do the check whether the day characters 9 and 10 are numbers as they should be. Okay, I'm saving the script. Okay, what shall I do next? I think that tests everything. Let me go and add a field and say date. No, let's take the original date name. Where is it? Invoice date import. Okay. Is in YYYY-MM for month -DD for day format updates on refresh. I'll add that field to the layout. I think maybe for this layout we can add all new fields to the layout. That should be a setting that I never normally use. Isn't this where it goes? Oh no, it's in system level settings. Add newly defined fields to current layout. Okay. Let's add this script to our regular one. Okay, so let's copy the standard format. This time we're using the invoice date. And we're outputting to the field I just created. I see that there's a typo in there. PD. Whoops. I'm going to cancel to undo that change. Discard changes. It's safer than deleting a field. I created a new field instead of editing the name of the existing one. Okay. Is valid. No, yes. Okay, so if the script gets past all of these conditions, then we can say that the result is yes. Okay, let's run the script. That is not what I was expecting. So how is that happening? I think I'm potentially... The script result is just the input. So there may be a exit script here which is not giving yes or no. That's not the case. Okay, this is one of those times where I potentially take a long time to work out what's going on. So I'm going to first search to see that nothing else in the script is putting a value into that field, and I'm guessing that we just have a duplicated field display here. Maybe not. Okay. I wonder if any watcher can spot the error before I can. Exit script. All the exit scripts should be yes or no. So let me just run the script on one. Let me run a single record script. Clean up, remove duplicate spaces. I'm running the wrong script. Okay. Let's try again. There we go. Great. So let's have a invoice date YYY-MM-DD updates on refresh. There we go, it got added to the layout automatically, that field, because of the file level setting. I just pressed Command comma for settings. Yes. Oh no, application level setting, not a file level setting, because Command comma is for application level settings. So adding the field automatically to the layout is in application level settings. So let's see, is this sequence dependent? It is. Strict sequence, section 3. I'm pressing the spacebar to enter the comment so I can edit it. So we want to check for validity first, and then we have a similar situation to here. So if the is valid, then we can use the original. Otherwise, we for now cannot use anything. So let's run again. What have I done this time? I'm updating the wrong fields again. Invoice date. Okay. I'm still doing the same thing. Okay. Invoice date, import, invoice date. Okay. Is in that format. Okay, I'm expecting to see some dates. Good. Now, something I didn't accommodate for is we can have a year 0000, but we can't have a month 00, and we can't have a day that is above 31, but that will also be month dependent, and we want to try and be as thorough and absolute as possible. So let's check, let's eliminate bad months. So after checking, after knowing that the characters 6 and 7 are numbers, we can grab them as a single number and make sure that they're between a certain range. So we have a sequence dependent. Okay, this whole thing is sequence dependent. Let's see. Well, when everything is sequence dependent, I try to not tag it as sequence dependent. It should be assumed. So I want to get the characters 5 and 6 if and only if. So if and only if can be IFF, but I prefer to be explicit because some people might see that as a typo. So if and only if both are numbers. Okay. We wouldn't get this far if they weren't. So character 5 and concatenate with character 6. No, character 6 and 7. Character 5 is a dash. Okay. We want to say if the, and we want to get that as a number. Get as number. I'm using, on a Mac, I'm using Alt and Return to go to a new line without closing the box. FileMaker is not spaces dependent for calculations and functions. So if the, and let's say as number. Okay, so if, I don't know whether we can, okay, let's say if the value is less than 1, then we need to exit the script. And we need to say invalid because characters 6 and 7 are numbers but not a valid month. Less than any valid month. Okay. Otherwise, we can say if greater than 12, they're not valid because there is no month after December. So we can say more than any valid month. And otherwise we can just keep going. Okay. Okay, so that will stop a bad date from coming through here. But I'm wondering why a date didn't come through already, because this seems to be respecting the number dash number format, and that says yes. So I'm wondering why the original date didn't come through before I added this rule, and possibly I will just leave it to be a mystery. Although I probably shouldn't normally, if I was being very, very careful. Is it just the case that I deleted that value before and I've forgotten? Probably. Possibly. Okay, so lots of dates now are being seen as invalid. Why is that? I think we're going to have to run the debugger. So this should be a valid date. So this should say yes, and we should have a date here. So let's see what is going wrong. So let's see, let's take this sequence to check for validity. I'll put it at the beginning. I'll run the debug. So, what is causing this date to not be recognized as valid? I assume the first set of checks are going to pass through fine. I'll turn on data viewer so you can see that the characters are being gotten. Are they being gotten in the right order? We should have 2024-31-01. Maybe we have the answer here, because 31 is obviously a day in January, and the computer doesn't like it. But then, so let's skip checking that date, and let's go to a date that is valid, that could be valid, or that should be valid. So let's run the debug instead on this date, this record. So we cycle through, we get character 1 is 2, and then we should have 024-06-01. Good. So that part of the script worked. So all of these first stages should be passed. Now what happens when we combine characters 6 and 7? Something is going wrong, because we should have, well, it's as a number, so that's okay. 06 as a number is 6. So is it less than 1? No. Oh, greater than 1. Okay. I forgot to change this to 12. Sorry if you saw that. It can probably be very frustrating, but at least you get to see the approach I take, because maybe you will not see errors and need approaches to efficiently find solutions to problems that we create ourselves. So let me run the whole script on the whole data set again. And so we have a lot of dates there, but actually let's see, in other cases where, okay, are we happy to, for example, if we have a slash are we happy to take that as a year slash month slash day format? I don't know whether day slash month would be common somewhere. I'd be a bit concerned about the slash. So this would be highly subjective, and you might need to look at the data set as a whole. So there are some other dates which can be highly subjective include dates that can be highly subjective, basically because of America versus most of the rest of the world, is that in America we may have in America we would typically have month, day, year. And in the UK and most of the rest of the world, so this is for normally America only. For the UK and most of the rest of the world, day slash month slash year. But what I'm wondering is whether anyone would generally use this, or whether a slash would always mean this. And I think I'm going to not take the risk in this case. So according to Stack Overflow, there is no particular standard for this format. Let's go to ChatGPT and ask regarding this. Are there locales or common programs that use YYYY dash slash DD slash MM? No. Okay, so in that case, I would be comfortable to say okay. In that case, I would be comfortable to say is a valid slash mm slash ddd. So I've copied the whole script, and the only differences I'm going to use is to call this a slash and call this a slash, and then I'm going to add a field which says yes. I'm going to still put this at the end, and I'm going to add this latest type of check to our script. Hello, invoice date import. Okay, we're going to check for slashes. Okay, else if. Okay, so what I'm going to say is that if the same format is respected, but with a slash instead of a dash, then we can use the date, but we will use it but we will substitute a slash for a dash. Okay, and then run the script. Doesn't work. What have I done wrong? Okay, this apparently doesn't follow the slash format. I expect I am just updating the wrong field. Okay, dash slash is valid. I'm running the same script twice again. So now we should see a value populate here when I run the refresh. Okay, so that got us at least two more dates. So if it was a very large data set, you could have many dates pull through that you would be comfortable with using.